Welcome to Move the Chains with Jonathan Rivers. Here's your host, Jonathan Rivers.
Let there be football. Welcome to Move the Chains. I'm Jonathan Bam Rivers. On the MTC call sheet, SEC Media Day recap. Listen, I've listened intently to what these coaches had to say, and I'm going to break down a lot of these programs and kind of tell you where I think they are. So sort of like a mini state of the program, because that's what I really love about SEC Media Days is that they give you a state of the program, and it's about what you hear and take away from it that matters. So I'm going to give you a synopsis on what I think these teams that I'm going to discuss have moving forward in 2025. So that's going to be the opening toss and the chain gang chatter. And in my nonsense narrative, a lot of people truly believe that college football, specifically the SEC, are missing Nick Saban. And I'm going to tell you why I don't think they do. And last but not least, there are some what-hit wonder possibilities in college football. And I just want to tell you why I think they could be better or they might just be good for a season. All that more here, right here on Move the Chains. But you know how we do it. Let's kick it off with the opening toss. So as I watched SEC Media Days and I listened to coaches, again, this is all a part of it. If you're going to be a coach in the premier conference in America, if you're going to be a leader of these young men who were trying to go out and win national championships and take care of NIL, then this is a part of the business. This is making sure that you're setting the tone. So none of this happens by mistake. Please believe that a lot of messages are sent, not just to the media, but to teams when it comes to these coaches. So the first team I want to talk about here are the LSU Tigers and Brian Kelly. So as I look at this, and you can look at the graphic that we have up, I want to talk about LSU because they finished 9-4 last year. Now, if you had a coach who in his first 3 seasons had 10-win season, a 10-win season, and a 9-win season, you'd say that's a success. You say this coach is doing what he needs to do to build a program. And I think Brian Kelly is no exception. I think Brian Kelly is doing a phenomenal job at LSU. But here's the issue, and this is what Brian Kelly understands as well. In each of his first 3 seasons, LSU has lost their opening game. In each of the first 3 seasons. And now they've got to play a team called Clemson in the opening game this year. And it's not going to get much easier. So when you look at LSU, what is the cause of that, right? LSU knows how to recruit. Brian Kelly is a good coach. Has the most wins of any current active head coach in college football. But for some reason, they have the Cincinnati Bengals of the NFL syndrome. They just don't get off to a good start. And if you're LSU and you look at the 9 wins that they acquired last season, they ended the season on a 3-game win streak. So Brian Kelly has to put himself, has to put his coaching staff, and has to put his players in a better position on how to start fast. I look at this team, and the funny thing about it is this team doesn't lack leadership, right? You can say in college football nowadays with a lot of teams that are dealing with the transfer portal and a lot of teams that have players that are leaving for the draft or what have you, there's just a lot of turn and churn. LSU isn't necessarily dealing with that at big places. They've got Whit Weeks, one of the best linebackers in the conference, who will be back again. You've got Harold Perkins Jr., who's one of the most dynamic players in college football if LSU understands how to use him properly, because that's been sort of an issue with them trying to determine where they want him. And you've also got Garrett Nussmeier, who in a lot of people's opinions will be not only a Heisman candidate, who may be a top-round draft pick going into the draft next year. So they're not lacking that type of experience or talent at key positions. They just need to figure out how to get it done. And it's interesting to see, for me, how Brian Kelly handles that situation down in Baton Rouge. All right, now I want to talk about the Ole Miss Rebels. So I guess the best thing you can say about Ole Miss and the worst thing you can say about Ole Miss is that we know who they are. And if you take a look at the graphic, plus 11 turnover margin. This team didn't make the college football playoff. Lane Kiffin is always going to have a squad that's able to do what they want to do offensively. It's just who they are, right? So we know who they are in that regard. Ole Miss is always going to be a team that beats top-tier teams because a lot of times they are top-tier themselves throughout a season, like the way they handled Georgia at home last year. Even when Jackson Dart got hurt. And Austin Simmons, who will likely be their starter this year, came in and led them on a touchdown drive and just kept the party going. Ole Miss shows you that's who they are, but they also show you they're a team that can lose to a Florida and a Kentucky in games that they shouldn't be losing. So when I say we know who Ole Miss is, that is a double-edged sword. It is a team that has a very high ceiling, but it's also a team that can have a very low floor in terms of the talent that they bring in. I don't know what Ole Miss will be in 2025. I know Ole Miss will score points. I know that I like to call Lane Kiffin the portal professional because the same way that I said Coach Deion Sanders at Colorado was NIL before NIL was NIL, Kiffin was transfer portal before transfer portal is what we know it is. This is why you saw his FAU squad at Florida Atlantic be what they were because he understands how to use the portal. Now, he's doing a better job of keeping kids from Mississippi in-house and going to Ole Miss, and he's going to continue to do that. This is a guy who understands how to win, and yet he may just be, ladies and gentlemen, a product of what the SEC is. Some teams that are a little bit better coached, some teams that are a little bit better prepared, some teams that are a little bit more talented, but it doesn't mean Ole Miss is not good. They will still be in the race to play in the SEC title game this year. The question is, will they have the same type of season they had last year from different players because their production is going to come from a lot of new individuals via the transfer portal? The Georgia Bulldogs. Now, Kirby Smart, to me, is a phenomenal coach. I don't have to say that just because he's won 2 national titles already. He's won a multitude of SEC titles as a coordinator and as a head coach. But I asked my producer, Josiah, this question about Georgia. I asked him, I said, hey, do you think Georgia underperformed last year? And he said, well, relative to their expectations. I said, no, not relative to their expectations. Do you think they underperformed? And he said, I do. Or he said he didn't. And I said, I agree. Georgia did not underperform in my estimation, but I think they had units that underperformed. I thought Georgia's wide receiving crew last year would be one of the best in the country. They weren't. Their defense was young and also dealing with injuries. And yet in the inconsistency that Georgia played through last year, they were still in the quarterfinals of the college football playoff and beat Texas, a team that a lot of people picked to win the SEC twice. Now, Georgia's production this year, more than 50% of it is going to come from players that are only first or second year players. This hasn't been the norm at Georgia, but it will be the norm at Georgia because they consistently put out NFL talent and people are going to leave because they're so stacked depth-wise, they're going to try to go play elsewhere. Do you think that this hinders Georgia? Do you think that this puts Georgia in a position to where, hey, we've got a bunch of new starters? I don't think so. And the reason I don't think so is because I think Kirby Smart understands what it means to create a culture, and he has to be creative in developing that culture. Because he made a statement during SEC Media Days, listen, there are going to be thousands and thousands of players that are good enough to perform at Georgia athletically. And he said, but he's looking for the guys that have that work ethic, they have that mindset, that have that desire to want to grow and be better, regardless of how much they're getting paid. Because you're not getting around that, ladies and gentlemen. Kirby knows it. Everybody else in the SEC knows it. But the Georgia Bulldogs, to me, are going to be a perennial favorite, even if they struggle early. And I think that's the difference between a Georgia and an LSU. You haven't seen Georgia struggle early, even with the turnaround. So that's something I'm going to be watching for because they've got more than half of their team production coming from first or second year players. All right, and the last team I want to talk about before we go to break are the Auburn Tigers. And I'm simply going to say this. When I listened to Hugh Freeze talk, the one word I heard out of Hugh Freeze was hope. He never said it, but I think this is what is illuminating from his conversation. Auburn last year had a -9 turnover margin and lost so many one-score games. And one thing that Hugh Freeze consistently talked about and harped on during SEC Media Days was the talent. How the talent that he has at Auburn now in his 3rd season is greater than the talent that he's ever had at this program. He keeps talking about how much more talented his team is. And in his estimation, he felt that if talent got us where we were, better talent's going to get us to where we want to be, and that's contending for an SEC title and for a playoff spot. And the reason I say there's hope in Auburn is because that's what Hugh Freeze is preaching. Now, the question I have is this hope false hope or is it substantiated hope? That's the only thing I want to know because they've had talent. Auburn has had, especially on the offensive side of the football, they've recruited well on the defensive line. Auburn has not lacked when it comes to talent, yet they've lacked production on the field. So you can look at that situation and decide where the issue is, but I think it's a cumulative issue for the entire program, whether it's coaching, whether it's decision-making, whether it's player personnel, whether it's player development, whether it's player production on the field. Auburn is a program that has the ability to be top tier. It just hasn't taken on that type of ability, nor has it taken on a persona in Hugh Freeze's first couple seasons, and that's something he's definitely trying to change with all the new talent that he has. And coming up after break on Chain Gang Chatter, Tennessee, Alabama, and Texas. I'm going to dig into the thoughts of Heupel, DeBoer, and Sarkisian. You don't want to miss it. Back when we move the chains, right after this. And welcome back into Move the Chains. Before I get to my continued discussion of the SEC Media Days, I want to take this opportunity, as always, to thank my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ for being able to host Move the Chains. It's truly a blessing. I also want to thank you, the fans, whether you're checking us out on Fox 54 every Saturday at 9:30, or whether you're on Instagram or TikTok or Facebook or the YouTube page. I really appreciate your support. And last but not least, to the best production crew in the business, I truly thank you because they make sure that this show is continuing to be innovative and interesting. And I truly appreciate the best production crew in the business. Having said all that, you know what time it is. It's time for the Chain Gang Chatter. All right, so let's get back to SEC Media Days. I want to talk about the Tennessee Volunteers, and I want to talk about Josh Heupel's ability to build a program. Josh Heupel has done a phenomenal job with Tennessee, and I think he's done a phenomenal job because he's been able to, at the same time, build an identity and a physical prowess at the same time. And that identity is they run fast. Offensively, they play fast. But they're so physical up front, and they're one of the best defenses in the country last year. Now, the one thing I want to say about Tennessee is there's no more James Pierce. There's no more Oscar Norman Lott. There's no more Squirrel White, right? There's no more Nico Iamaleava. So they've lost some pivotal production from the past few seasons that helped build this program. Now, Tennessee has still been recruiting very, very well, right, with guys like Travis Smith Jr. out of Westlake High School, and, of course, Aguilar, who transferred in from UCLA, who was kind of like a straight-up swap with the Bruins. But Tennessee is going to have to depend on their young guys. And that's why when I think about the Volunteers, I really just think about saying the word accelerated youth progression, because you don't have time in the SEC to sit back and let people develop and use it as an excuse. Right? Because, see, they'll have depth. They'll just have young depth. Tennessee, like everybody else, has hit the transfer portal. And I think an opportunity in the transfer portal really lies as a complementary piece as opposed to trying to build your program. But every coach has his own opportunity, his own demeanor and mindset regarding that. I think Tennessee is still going to be a team that's formidable. I think you know what Tennessee can be, and I don't even think they've hit their ceiling as a program. So coming into the season, I think they will have different opportunities to be one of the best teams in the conference and in the nation, but it may take them some time. The question is, will the time that these young players are developing cost them in terms of wins and losses? If so, it can still be a productive season, but it'll be the difference between them being a playoff team and a team playing in the bowl game because they registered 8 or 9 wins. Alabama Crimson Tide. So this is one of the most intriguing programs to me because I truly believe that Kalen DeBoer has to have the buy-in. And I don't just mean the buy-in from fans or the buy-in from players. I mean the buy-in from himself. And I know that sounds crazy, but follow me here. Kalen DeBoer has to buy into the fact that he's building his program, not a program. Hey, there's a difference there. He's not trying to build a program in Alabama. Alabama's a program that's already been built for decades. But he's trying to build his program. In his second season, getting a lot of his guys, starting with his offensive coordinator, Ryan Grubb, who he tried to get last year but ended up being in the NFL. So even those small situations, and then having Simpson at quarterback and being able to recruit at a high level and also use the transfer portal. Alabama is a team that doesn't lack in talent. Everybody knows that. But Kalen DeBoer has the right to build his system. And at the same time, people have to understand that I understand what expectations are at Alabama, but they have to understand that building his program is going to take the opportunity for him to develop his players, his coaches, and himself in this conference. So this is not just a 1 year or 2 year thing. Alabama, in my estimation, is committed to Kalen DeBoer for the long term based on the contract that they gave him. So I want to see how his program looks in his second year. And lastly, I want to talk about the Texas Longhorns. As I listen to Sark talk, and as I look up and down this roster, and as I think about where Texas is, I can really only think about one word, and that's surplus. I really feel like the Texas Longhorns are operating in a surplus. They're operating in a surplus when it comes to the talent they have. They're operating in a surplus when it comes to their coaching staff, right? This coaching staff has been together in terms of head coach, offensive, and defensive coordinator since 2021. That's something that you can't say for a lot of teams. That's consistency. And I think it's real big that Sark talked about the ability for his team to grow as the acumen of this team grew. When he talked about GPA, when he talked about the development, when he talked about player accountability, those things really stuck out to me because he understands who he is and he understands how to build a program. So Sarkisian's in a situation where Texas will be one of the best teams in college football. They're presumably going to have one of the best quarterbacks. Have you ever seen somebody get so much hype who hasn't even started a game yet? And I guess it comes with the name when I'm talking about Arch Manning. But they've had a program consistent with what it takes to build in any conference to be one of the best in the nation. And I expect nothing different from the Texas Longhorns in 2025. All right, when we come back from the break, it'll be time for my favorite segment of the show, and I'm going to tell you why college football does not miss the GOAT. Back with my favorite segment of the show right after this. And welcome back into the show, and now it's time for my favorite segment to Move the Chains. It's time for the Nonsense Narrative. The SEC misses Nick Saban. No, they don't. The SEC doesn't miss Nick Saban, one, because Nick Saban doesn't want to be in college football anymore in terms of being a head coach. And that's fine, and that's his right. But the SEC also doesn't miss Nick Saban because Nick Saban is sprinkled all through the conference, ladies and gentlemen, right? Steve Sarkisian, Kirby Smart, Billy Napier. They've coached under Nick Saban. So pieces of Nick Saban are left throughout college football, and that's what a phenomenal coach is supposed to do. And I know there are some talks of Saban possibly coming back to the SEC, and I think that would be great for him if that's what he wanted to do. But college football is still in a phenomenal place with or without Nick Saban, and it's not because he was harming the game. It's because he did the game that much of a favor. He developed it. He put them in an opportunity to be the best conference in America, and now people whom he's taught and that he's coached and that he's developed as head coaches are now taking on the mantle of trying to continue to be the premier conference in America. All right, hey, when we come back from the break, it'll be the final drive. Back with the last part of Move the Chains right after this. Hey, welcome back in to Move the Chains. And now it's time for the final segment of the show. It's time for the final drive. South Carolina. Only question I have is, will there be a one-hit wonder? Shane Beamer has built this program from the inside out, from front to back, from bottom to top. He's going to have a Heisman candidate in Lenore Sellers. He's going to have one of the best defensive fronts in college football. Will this be an opportunity for South Carolina to take the next step, or will it simply be that last year was their best year? All right, don't forget, you can not only catch Move the Chains right here on the Sports Leader WXTX Fox 54, but you can also catch us on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. It's on the screen. It's at @move_the_chains. Like, subscribe, leave a comment, share. We're here for it. Hey, like always, another banger for the best production crew in the business. I'm your boy, Jonathan Bam Rivers. And always remember, build every day of your life brick by brick. And until next time, right here on Move the Chains, God bless.